Coming up, again, an old friend of mine, I've known for a long time, and we bullied him into writing not only a short story collection, but also a novel. His cleverly titled Horror Story and Other Horror Stories came out in 2009, and then Nexus Ascension, or as we say, Nexus Ascension, came out this year, and he's working on another novel, The Apostle, which we may or may not buy. We're undecided right now. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, my very good friend and hairy fellow, Mr. Robert Boyczuk.
Hello, my name is Bob, and I'm a workshopaholic. I've taken many paid writing workshops, courses, and I've discussed the issue of teaching writing with many people, usually in a bar after several beers, but I've never actually taught a writing workshop. So in a sense that's good, because I'm not really prejudiced. I don't have a vested interest in teaching creative writing, but I've certainly taken more than my share of creative writing workshops. I've always wanted to be a writer since I was a teenager, so there I am. I don't know if you can see the picture very well, but that's me at university. Actually working on an essay, which was a piece of fiction as well. Well, not in the usual sense. It was both. It was a metafictive, fictive essay for a teacher who is open to those sorts of things. I began my university career by acquiring a degree in computer science, but I wanted to be a writer. So I thought, gee, maybe I'll take a few English courses. I thought that would help me with my writing. And I took enough courses so that it became very easy for me to complete a degree in English. So I stayed an extra year and did a degree in English, thinking that this would help me with my writing. Well, of course it didn't. Because it's a very different thing, studying literature and studying writing. So, yeah, I was probably in university for about 8 or 9 years. The last 3 or 4 of which I was in English, and trying to do a little writing, but not too successfully. I graduated and realized that really studying English literature taught me nothing about writing. So as soon as I graduated from English, I began taking writing workshops, and it was probably never a year where I wasn't in at least 2 writing workshops, so probably 2 semesters out of 3 for the next 10 or 15 years. Here's a list of the workshops I can remember taking. So this is why I'm qualified to talk about this, because I've been in a lot of these workshops. So I took at least 4 that I can remember at Ryerson. I took at least 3 at U of T, so I can remember, one of which was poetry. Yeah, I know. I did one at George Brown, and I actually signed up for a couple of others that I withdrew, from which I withdrew. Well, one because it was, I think it was Anne Marie McDonald was running it. But there were like 30 people in a class, and you can't have 30 people in a writing workshop. I took a comedy writing workshop at Second City, which was very cool. I did 2 of those Humber School for Writers workshops. They're like full day, week-long workshops. And of course I did the requisite Clarion West, which is a 6-week intensive workshop where you have to write a story every week. You're working with renowned authors in the field. And a bunch of others I forgot, because I know I've been in many more, but I just can't remember them all. And I still Jones for workshops, but I haven't taken one in the last few years. There's my lovely Clarion group. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of the Clarion groups, but they all sort of seem to look the same. And there's a picture of one of the workshop leaders at Clarion. That's Jeff Ryman, who absolutely hated my stuff. And he once said to me, when we were supposed to have a private session and he was going to evaluate my work, he said, "I don't think there's any point, is there?" And behind him is Louise Marley, who's also in my workshop, and she has like 6 or 7 books out now. And she did this after he said something really bad about my work in one of the sessions in front of 20 people or so. I was once even in a workshop at the Central Reference Library when my wife went into labor. And she's never let me forget that. So the point here is that I've been in a hell of a lot of workshops. Okay, so I want to know, how many people here have ever paid for a writing workshop or a course? So quite a few. That's fairly typical, especially in the genres like science fiction and stuff. How many people here have been in a writing program, like a university program? So MFAs and stuff like that? Yeah. So a few people. And how many people think they actually learned something? Okay, so a fair number. Okay, I'm going to try and convince you didn't. Anyway, as I was, my misnamed talk is, the title was Why You Can't Teach Writing. And as soon as I started thinking about this, I realized that I misnamed my talk, first of all, but that I was discovering a lot of evidence that contradicted what I thought. I still have some fundamental beliefs about teaching writing, which I'm going to share with you. However, I found I was disagreeing with myself. So please, if you feel I'm unfairly disagreeing with myself, you can speak up for me.
Yes, Bob.
Thanks. Okay, so when I tried to find a structure for this thing, it was all over the place because there's all sorts of big questions about teaching writing. I mean, what does teaching mean? What does writing mean? What does learning writing mean? It's not writing, it's creative writing. So I ended up asking myself a bunch of questions, and that's kind of how I structured this. Can creative writing be taught? Ooh, what happened there? And the answer is yes. Any questions? Now, the answer is yes, because it is taught. So can we teach writing? Yes, because people do it. Are they successful at it? That's another question. So the first thing I had to ask myself is, what do people mean when they say they're teaching creative writing? How is it actually being taught? What are they hoping to accomplish? I don't know if you, oh yeah, you can, that's not too bad. So I found an article written by John Barth, who's a well-known literary writer who's been intimately involved in many writing programs, and he wrote an article, I think it was in the New York Times, was entitled How Writing Can Be Taught. And it was a very interesting article, and he kind of concluded that indeed it could be taught because it is being taught. So that's kind of where I got my first answer from, that yes. But he suggested there's 4 things that people need to learn to be right. And the first is the 4 universal ways, study the material. In other words, life. You got to have something to write about, right? You got to know about life if you're going to write, right? That's what people want to read about. The medium, which is language, simply putting together a grammatically correct sentence, the use of words, so on. The craft, fiction, character, dialogue, that kind of thing. And the art. And so when we talk about creative writing and teaching creative writing, he says in the right below that you can't do the first thing, really. He does suggest, I don't know if he suggests it there, but later in the article that reading good literature is part of the learning about life. But it's not really the proper subject of a creative writing course. And he says the middle 2 are really the meat of it. You can't teach art. Art is so subjective, and in fact, the art part of it is really the craft and using language. So in his article, he basically says we can teach craft, we can teach language, we can't teach people about life, and we can't teach people art because that's kind of a mixture of the first 3. And I kind of agree with that. I'm not sure I agree that you can teach craft, but so language and craft seem to be what people are trying to teach. And by the way, if you have any questions or objections or need to go to the bathroom, just raise your hand. Okay, so I don't really know what people mean when they talk about craft. I found a few other articles on teaching writing, and people talk about, oh, you can teach craft. I'm not really sure what people mean by that and where they draw the line, because there's a lot of stuff going on in a story or a novel, and it's, so what do you mean by craft exactly? What struck me when I was thinking about this was that if you go into a program to be a sculptor or an artist, a fine artist of any sort, a visual artist, you typically start with foundation skills. But writing workshops, creative writing workshops and programs don't really teach foundation skills. I think there's a couple of issues here. One is that people come in, because everybody writes, even if it's not fiction, people come in assuming that they have the foundation skills. And having been in many, many workshops, I can tell you that's not true. There are a lot of people who can't put together a grammatically correct sentence. So the first thing that struck me is, yeah, we typically in creative writing courses, we don't teach foundation skills. And I'm not sure why. I think it's just because people believe they can write. The common format for delivering creative writing courses, teaching craft, is the workshop. Workshops are, you basically sit around, people read their stories, or they send them ahead of time. People in the workshop read them and then critique them, and then there's a workshop leader. And I found another article on can you teach creative writing, and I quite like this, because I think this is really what workshops are often about. It's, I'll just let you read it. Yeah, this is interesting, because this is taken from an article in the New Yorker by a pretty well-known writer who teaches in writing, creative writing. And like Barth, he starts off sort of questioning, our underlying assumptions and saying that it's really hard to judge and so on. But both Barth and Menard, whatever, end up saying, yes, you can teach writing. They sort of, I'm not sure I buy their line of reasoning, but certainly I think that's true, yeah.
I think you missed the point there. It's the other way around. It's the 12 people who are critiquing the one that are learning something.
Yes, you're anticipating some of my future slides, but thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, that's the other thing I want. So did I ask how many people here teach creative writing? How many people do? Because I'm sure a number of you do, right? Yeah. Peter. Okay, so something else that struck me. So I've got a bunch of observations and questions, and not really a lot of conclusions. But the language of creative writing course offerings. If you go on websites, if you look in catalogs and stuff like that, here are a lot of the terms you'll see over and over again. I think those terms in themselves make the offering suspect. When's the last time you looked at a course offering for an engineering course where they use these kind of terms? So what the hell's going on here? So this is my proposed workshop. Please hold your applause till the end. I'm actually serious about this. When I take writing workshops, now I suppose when I first took them, I was looking for validation, which is what a lot of people do when they go into these creative writing workshops. They don't actually want to learn something, they just want validation. Not everyone, but a lot of people. But I reached the stage, I think, where I wanted honest, frank criticism. I don't care what works in the story, but it's always nice to hear what works. But a lot of workshops are all about what works, but not a lot about what doesn't work. And what I want when I put my money down is I want brutal, honest criticism. Not about the content of the story, but about the structure and characterization and dialogue and stuff like that. So I don't want them judging what I'm trying to say in the story. That's the realm of literature, right? Critiquing literature. But in a workshop, I want people to tell me what clunks in the story, what doesn't work, what stops the reader in mid-sentence.